Hello again. Welcome back. Let's go on and get this party started. So, today we are moving on with chapter 5, 6, 17. I'll go ahead and wait a minute for everybody to get online. Just so you guys know, this is going to be, we're going to keep going until next Wednesday, until we got 5 more days now. That is going to be officially the last day of school. So, we're going to have the last day on the 20th. If you guys have anything that you want to be doing, Jesus, which Jesus are you? All right, that's cool. Feel free to come back tomorrow. Um, that's Franco. Thanks for popping by. So again, we're gonna have the last day of Jesus Santa Cruz. All right, good to see you. So like I said, you guys feel free to let me know if you have any special ideas for the last day of class. If you want to do anything special, this is for you guys. We're gonna be here until next Wednesday. So that's gonna be the last day. So let's go ahead and pick it up where we left off. We are on chapter 17. So far, we're about to start in underwater. So our characters are actually in a submarine with some advanced technology for the time. Remember, this is the turn of the century, so it's before basically electricity. They had electricity, but not like the kind that we use. Diving suits that they're describing in the book are more advanced than anything that actually existed in the meantime. So we finally arrived at the outskirts of the forest, which is the underwater forest, of course. Surely one of the finest in Captain Nemo's immense domain. He regarded it as his own, and he had laid the same claim to it that, as in the first days of the world, the first men had laid to their forests on land. Besides, who else could dispute the ownership of this underwater property? What other bolder pioneer would come, axe in hand, to clear away these dark thickets? This forest consisted of dark, tree-like plants, but when we went under the huge arches, my eyes were instantly struck by the unique arrangement of their branches, an arrangement I've never witnessed before. None of the weeds that carpeted the seafloor, none of the branches garnishing the shrubbery, crawled, leaned, or stretched on the horizontal plane. They all rose right up towards the surface of the ocean. Every filament or ribbon, no matter how thin, stood ran-raw straight. Fucus plants and creepers were growing in stiff vertical lines, controlled by the density of the element that generated them. After I parted them with my hands, I noticed the motionless plants stood straight up back to their original positions. This was the land of the uprights. I soon got used to this peculiar arrangement, likewise the comparative darkness that was surrounding us. Sharp chunks of rock were scattered across the seafloor in the forest and were hard to avoid. Here the range of underwater flora seemed pretty comprehensive to me, as well as more plentiful than it might have seen in the Arctic or tropical zones where there's less variety. For a few minutes I kept accidentally confusing the two kingdoms, mistaking animals for plants, plants for animals. Who hasn't made the same blunder? Flora and fauna are so closely associated in the underwater world. I noticed that all these commodities from the vegetable kingdom weren't attached to the seafloor only by the most makeshift methods. They hadn't any roots, and I didn't care which solid and they didn't care which solid objects secured them: sand, sea, shell, pods, or pebbles. They didn't ask for their host for a livelihood, just a point of purchase. These plants were self-propagating and owe their existence to the water that supports and feeds them. In places of leaves, most of them sprouted whimsically sharp blades that were confined to narrow gamut of colors consisting only of pink, green, olive, tan, and brown. Then again, I say it is not yet pressed like it is in the Nautilus specimens. It was like some peacock's tails that opened like a fan in a cooling breeze. Scarlet sereniums, sea tangle stretching to the edible young shoots, twisting strings of bull kelp that bloomed up to 50 feet of height. Bouquets of mermaids' cups whose stems grow wider at the top, and a number of open sea plants, all without flowers. It's an odd anomaly in this peculiar element, one humorous naturalist put it. The animal kingdom blossoms, and the vegetable kingdom doesn't. In these various types of shrubbery, as big as trees in the temperate zones, and in their moist shade were clustered actual bushes of moving flowers, hedges of zoophytes, measuring the growth of cauliflower coral that were streaked in the twisting furrows, yellowish cup coral with transparent tentacles, plus stony coral from the order of Zooranthria with grassy tufts. And on top of this illusion, the fish flies flew from branch to branch like a swarm of hummingbirds, while yellow cardinal fish with bristling jaws and sharp scales, flying gurnards, and pinecone fish rose underfoot like the covey of a spine. So basically, what he's saying is that the coral here looks so much like a plant, and the plant like looks so much like the coral that it's almost hard for him to like separate them. Around 1 o'clock, Captain Nemo gave me the signal to halt. Speaking for myself, I was all too happy to oblige, and we stretched under the bower of a winged kelp, whose long slim shoots stood up like arrows. This short break was a delight. The only thing missing was the charm of conversation, but it was impossible to speak and impossible to reply. I simply nudged my big brass headpiece against Conseil's. I saw a happy gleam in the gallant lad's eyes, and to convey his pleasure, he jiggled around his carapace in the world's silliest way. After 4 hours of strolling, I stood quite amazed not to feel any intense hunger. I had no idea why my belly stood in such a good mood, but in exchange I experienced the most irresistible desire from sleep that has overcome every diver. Accordingly, my eyes soon closed behind the heavy glass windows, and I fell into an uncontrollable doze, which till then I'd been able to fight off only through the movement of our walking. Captain Nemo and his muscular companion were already stretched out in the crystal clear water, setting us a fine example of nap time. I can't estimate how long I was in my slumber, but when I awoke, the sun seemed to be gravitating towards the horizon. Captain Nemo was already up, and I'd started to stretch my limbs when an unexpected slight yanked me right off my feet. A few steps away, a monstrous sea spider, 3 feet high, was watching me with beady eyes, ready to spring at me. Though my diving suit was heavy enough to protect me from the creature's bites, I couldn't help but pull back in horror. Just then Conseil woke up along with the Nautilus's sailor. Captain Nemo alerted his companion to this hideous crustacean, which a swing of the rifle butt instantly mowed down, and I watched the creature's horrible legs writhing in dreadful convulsions. This confrontation reminded me that the other, more alarming creatures had to be lurking around the dark reaches, and my diving suit might not be adequate protection against their attacks. Though, since these had not previously crossed my mind, and I was now determined to be on my guard. Meanwhile, I figured that this rest period would be a turning point in our stroll, but I was wrong. Instead of heading back to the Nautilus, Captain Nemo continued our daring excursion. The seafloor kept sinking, and significantly steeper slope took us to greater depths. It must have been nearly 3 o'clock when we reached a narrow valley scooped out in between the high vertical walls located at 500 feet down. Thus, thanks to the perfection of our equipment, we've gone 300 feet below the limit that nature had previously set for underwater excursions. So, in other words, they broke the barrier. They broke the record for like how deep you could go in a diving suit. Of course, this is all science fiction, but the idea is that his technology is so advanced that it's better than the best in the world. I say 500 feet, even though I didn't have any instruments for determining this distance. But I knew that even at the clearest seas, the sun rays couldn't reach any deeper. Now then, at this exact point, it got completely dark. Not a single object was visible more than 10 steps ahead. So I started groping my way when suddenly I saw the glow of a bright white light. Captain Nemo had just activated his electrical device. His companion did likewise. Conseil and I followed suit. By turning a switch, I established contact between the induction coil and the glass spiral, and the light from our 4 lanterns illuminated the sea for a radius of 80 feet. Captain Nemo kept plummeting into the dark depths of the forest, whose shrubbery was sparser and sparser. I noticed the vegetable life was vanishing, faster than animal life. The open sea plants had already given up in their increasingly arid seafloor, whereas a prodigious number of animals were still swarming. Zoophytes, articulata, mollusks, and fish. As we walked around, I figured the lights from our Runker-off devices were bound to attract some kind of denizens of the dark strata. But if they came near us, at least they kept their distance regrettable from a hunter's point of view. Several times I saw Captain Nemo stop and take aim with his rifle. Then, after sighting down the barrels for a few seconds, he would straighten up and resume his walk. By around 4 o'clock, this marvelous excursion finally had run its course. Imposing in its sheer mass, a wall of magnificent rock stood in front of us, a pile of gigantic boulders, an enormous granite cliffside pitted with dark caves, but not offering a single gradient that we could climb up. This was the underpinning of Crespo Island. This was land. The captain stopped suddenly. A signal from him brought us to a halt, and however much I wanted to go up the wall, I had to stop. Captain Nemo's domain ended here. He had no desire to go outside of it. Farther on that was the part of the globe that he would no longer set foot. Our return trip began. Captain Nemo resumed to lead our little band, always heading forward without hesitation. I noted that we did not follow the same path in going back to the Nautilus. This new route, very steep and therefore very arduous, took us up towards the surface of the sea. But this return to the upper strata was so sudden that decompression took place too quickly, which could have led to serious organic disorders, giving us internal injuries so fatal to divers. With great promptness, the light reappeared and grew stronger, and the refraction of the sun, already low on the horizon, again ringed the edges of various objects with a whole color spectrum. At a depth of 30 feet, we walked along the swarm of small fish with every species. More than plentiful birds were, and more agile too. But no aquatic game worthy of a gunshot had yet come to sight as of yet. Just then I saw the captain's weapon spring to his shoulder and track a moving object through the bushes. A shot went off. I heard a faint hissing sound, and an animal dropped a few steps away, literally struck by lightning. A magnificent sea otter from the genus Enhydra was the only exclusively marine quadruped. Almost 5 feet long, this otter had to be worth a good price. Its coat was chestnut brown above, silver underneath. That would have made it one of those marvelous fur pieces sought out by Russian and Chinese marketplaces. The fineness and luster of its pelt guaranteed that that animal was worth at least $400. I was full of wonder at this unusual animal. Its circular head adorned with short ears, its round eyes, white whiskers like those on a cat, and webbed clawed feet, its bushy tail. Hunted and trapped by fishermen, this valuable carnivore had gotten extremely scarce and taken refuge in the northernmost parts of the Pacific, where in all likelihood its species will soon be facing extinction. Captain Nemo's companion picked the animal up, loaded it on his shoulder, and we took to the trail once again. For an hour, plains of sand unrolled under our steps. Then the seafloor rose to within 6 feet of the surface of the water. Then I saw our images clearly reflected on the underside of the waves, but upside down. An identical band passed above us that duplicated our movements and gestures. A perfect likeness, in short, of the quartet over which we walked, but with our heads down and our feet in the air. After noteworthy effects, heavy clouds went on above us, forming and fading swiftly. But after thinking it over, I realized that these so-called clouds were simply caused by the changing densities in the long round swells. And I even spotted the foaming white caps of their breaking crests spreading over the surface of the water. What's more, I saw the shadows of the large birds going by overhead and swiftly skimming the surface of the ocean. On this occasion, I witnessed one of the finest gunshots ever to thrill a hunter to the marrow. A large bird with a wide wingspan, clearly visible, drew near and hovered over us. It was just when it was just a few yards above the waves, Captain Nemo's companion took aim and fired. The creature dropped, electrocuted, and its descent brought it within the reach of our skillful hunter, who then grabbed a hold of it. It was an albatross, one of the finest species of a wonderful specimen of the open sea fowl. This incident didn't interrupt our walk. For 2 hours, we sometimes went over piles of sand, sometimes over prairies of seaweed that were quite arduous to cross. In all honesty, I was dead tired by the time I spotted, half a mile away, a faint glow cutting into the darkness of the waters. It was the Nautilus's beacon. In 20 minutes, we were back on board. When I was there, I would literally be able to breathe easier because my tank's air supply had gotten very low on oxygen. But I hadn't reckoned on that run-in or slight delay of our arrival. I was lagging about 20 steps behind when I saw Captain Nemo suddenly come back towards me. With his powerful hands, he pushed me to the ground while his companion did the same for Conseil. At first, I didn't know what to make of this sudden attack, but I was reassured to see the captain lying down and staying motionless next to me. I was stretched out on the seafloor under some bushes of algae when I raised my head and spotted two enormous masses hurtling by, throwing off phosphorescent glimmers. My blood turned to ice in my veins. I saw that two fearsome sharks were threatening us. Sharks, excuse me. They were blue sharks, dreadful man-eaters, with enormous tails, dull glassy eyes, and phosphorescent matter oozing from holes around their snouts. Monstrous fireflies that could grind up an entire man in their iron jaws. I don't know if Conseil was busy with their classification, but as for me, I looked at their silver bellies and their fearsome teeth-studded mouths from a viewpoint not exactly scientific, more as a food item than a naturalist. Luckily, these voracious creatures have poor eyesight. They went on without noticing us, brushing us with their brownish fins. Miraculously, we'd escaped greater danger than meeting up with a tiger in the deep jungle. Guided by its electric trail, we reached the Nautilus a half an hour later. The outside of the door had been left open, and Captain Nemo closed it after we went back to the first cell. Then he pressed a button. I heard pumps operating inside the ship, and I felt the water lowering around me. In a few seconds, the cell was completely empty. The inside door was opened, and we went into the wardroom. There our diving suits were removed, if not without some difficulty, and I retired to my stateroom thoroughly worn out, weary from lack of food and rest, and full of wonder at the startling excursion of the ocean depths. Sorry, I don't have Twitch, I don't have Fortnite on here either. All right, guys, thanks for coming. Again, we're going to keep doing this until next Wednesday. If you guys have any ideas for the last day of class, let me know. I'm happy open to suggestions. And I'll see you guys tomorrow at the same time. Peace.